Alright guys, it is finally time for our Pokemon Scarlet and Violet damage report. Now, I tried my best to get this video done before Pokemon Day, and clearly I'd failed in that endeavor. But during their little presentation they had for Pokemon Day, they did announce DLC for these games. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and give my thoughts on the DLC announcement in the same video as well. I'm going to save most of the DLC talk until the end, because I do want to go through like everything in the base game first. I did suffer my way through a playthrough of these. I did not buy them, I did not play them, just like the last several Pokemon games. But I watched the playthrough, I got all my research done, I have all my facts and figures and notes and everything laid out here, ready to go. So we're going to go through everything for the base game first, and then we'll get into the DLC announcements at the end. But anyway, so as for the base game, first and foremost, let's address the elephant in the room and talk about the Pokedex. So, this gen added 103 new Pokemon, which I'm honestly actually surprised that they did that many. I was not expecting a triple-digit total of Pokemon really ever again in a generation. The last several have been, like 70 to 90 range. So I was expecting something closer to that. So it's nice that they did increase the number of new Pokemon back to closer what it was for some of the earlier gens. And this does bring our total number of Pokemon, of course, up to a whopping 1,008 now. So we've finally done it. We've hit the 4-digit range. We crossed 1,000 Pokemon. Now, of course, less than half of those are actually in the fucking game, but, So, that's the other big issue. Of course, Dexit continues. There are 400 Pokemon in the Paldea Pokedex. And then there's an additional, I believe, 76 more Pokemon that are programmed into the game but aren't in the regional dex. They did the same thing with Switch, with Sword and Shield as well. So, altogether, there's 476 Pokemon in the base game. Yes, the DLC they just announced is adding more. Again, we'll get to that later. But base game, out the gate, we got 476, so less than half of the actual total pool of Pokemon there are now. Of course, there are no Mega Evolutions in the game. There are no Z moves. There is no maxing Dyna or Giganta in nature. So, all the past gimmicks are removed. They are replaced by a new gimmick, which I'll talk about a little bit later. In addition, I believe there are 179 moves that have been removed. That's not counting the Z moves and max moves that are, tied to those gimmicks. That's funny because I'm not totally sure, but I believe it might be the exact number of moves that were in Pokemon Legends Arceus is how many moves got removed from this game. So that's kind of funny. I think that is more than Sword and Shield, if I remember correctly. It's been a while since I counted those up, and I didn't go back and look. But I think it's more moves that were missing from Sword and Shield, but drastically less than were missing from Legends Arceus, and I think from BDSP as well. But overall, as far as the new pool of Mons go themselves, I actually think that this is a better crop than we got for Gen 8. Gen 8 had a bunch of designs that I did not think were very good, far more than any previous generation had. And I did not get that feeling this time with the Gen 9 crop of Pokemon. There's a few duds, of course, but every gen has a few of those. There was a reasonable number of them this time, much more reasonable than last gen. And there was I'm pretty sure a higher number of ones that I actually really liked this gen. Now, Gen 8 did get helped a lot by the new Pokemon that they introduced mid-generation, like the stuff that they added from the expansion pass with the new legends and regional variants and stuff, and the new variants and new evolutions that they added in Legends Arceus, except for a few, those fucking god-awful origin forms and the shitty Gigantamaxes and stuff. Other than that, most of the mid-gen additions from Gen 8 really helped that crop overall. But as far as like the base ones that were introduced in Sword and Shield versus the base ones introduced in Scarlet and Violet, I think Scarlet and Violet definitely won out here. Now, I'm not gonna go through all 103 of these designs and comment on each and every one of them, because, like usual, I'm just neutral on, a large swath of them. But I am going to go through some of the important ones and just a few random ones that I just feel like commenting on. So, of course, first and foremost, we do have the starters. Now, I just talked about how I like this crop of designs better, but the starters don't really apply to that. I don't like any of these starter lines very much. Sprigatito is great. Florigato is alright. Meowscarada is okay, I guess. I don't really care for her too much. And the other two lines are absolute shit. Quaxley just turns into a big gay dancing duck thing. So, yeah. And then Fuecoco just ends up looking more and more retarded as he evolves. Which is shocking to me. Like, how can you take the concept of flaming skull crocodile and make it not cool? Like, it's a feat that they managed to do that. I don't know how they pulled that off, but they found a way. So, I don't care for the water and fire lines at all. The grass one gets a little bit of credit for the first two, but the last one isn't much for me either. So, the starters overall are a disappointment. The Gen 8 starters were a disappointment as well. I liked all three of their base forms, but none of their evolutions. So, I guess technically Gen 8 wins out because that was 3 out of 9, and this is really only 2 out of 9. So, yeah, not a fan of the starters, but there was some better stuff this gen. Some of which were actually the regional variants this time, which is interesting because we actually only got 2 of them, which is drastically lower than the amount of regional variants we usually get. But the only 2 we got this time were Paldean Wooper, who is just Jotonian Wooper, except brown. And then we got Paldean Tauros, who is just Cantonian Tauros, except black. So, they are largely recolors, but I do like the original design, so I like these designs too. Now, Tauros has 3 different forms that are called breeds, that are different types. All 3 of them look good. The only real difference between them is their horns and their manes, and also, I guess, their tails a little bit. But I do like all these designs. Tauros has always been a Pokemon that I liked a lot, so it's cool to see him get something. Now, conspicuous by his absence here is Paldean Quagsire, and that's because there is no Paldean Quagsire. Instead, Paldean Wooper evolves into a new Pokemon, because also we did get 5 Legacy evolutions this time. One of which is Wooper's new evolution, which is Clodsire. Which, Clodsire is goofy looking, but I absolutely love him. I think he's a great design. You can't see it in the official art here, but he has like giant spikes that come up out of his back, and that's just really awesome. So, I really like Clodsire. As for the rest of them, Girafarig got an evolution in Farigiraf, which I was kind of on the fence on at first, but the more I've seen him, the more I've warmed up to him, so I actually kind of like him too. Bisharp got an evolution named King Gambit, which he is a little on the goofy side, but that entire line is kind of on the goofy side, and I think he fits well with the aesthetic of the other ones. So I kind of like him too. One I did not like was the evolution for Dunsparce, which is named the Dunsparce. And it's just Dunsparce again with another body segment. He has another form where he can have 3 body segments as well. But, people waited a really long time for a Dunsparce evolution, and we finally get one. And it's just a meme. When I realized that Dunsparce himself is also just a meme. But still, there's so much they could have done with that, and all they did was give him another body segment and like another chin spike and a cap for his tail and call it a day. So I feel like that was just wasted potential. Wasted potential in a Pokemon game. That never happens. But I was not a fan of that design. And I felt like there was a million different ways they could have went with that, and they just went with the meme bait direction. Which meme bait has been a huge problem for a while now, and I'm just kind of sick of it. So I didn't care for that one. Now on the other end of the spectrum, we have a Primeape evolution named Annihilate, which is an awesome name and a fantastic design. It's actually one of the best designs from this entire gen. Which, this thing is far more cool than a Primeape evolution has any right to be. It's part ghost type now, so like the story of it is it basically got so angry that it died and became an angry ghost. And that's just fucking cool. So, I really love Annihilate. I think it's one of the top designs, not only from the Legacy evolutions, but one of the top designs of the entire gen, at least so far. So, I like most of the Legacy ones except for the Dunsparce. The rest of them are pretty cool. Now, on the other hand, we got these fucking abominations, which these things look like regional variants, but they're not. I think it's just a fan term. I've seen fans call them regional fakes. I don't think that's an official term. I think that's just what the fans are calling them. So basically what these are, they're new Pokemon, but they look like older Pokemon, and apparently it's just supposed to be a coincidence that they happen to look like older Pokemon. They're not related to them, they don't evolve from them, they're not variants or anything. It's just a coincidence that these things totally look like the Diglett and Tentacool lines. They're totally unrelated. They got different types. The whole concept is stupid. The ones that look like the Diglett line are named Wiglet and Wugtrio. And they're supposed to be eels, I guess. It's totally a coincidence that an eel evolved to look exactly like Diglett, even though they're totally unrelated to each other. That's believable. The ones that look like the Tentacool line are named Toadscool and Toadscruel. Now, as far as designs go, I like their designs better. They don't look, phallic-y like the other ones do. So, they got that going for them. But, even though they look a little bit better, I still hate this entire concept. I hate that everyone, suddenly became fucking biologists and learned what convergent evolution is and tried to pass that off as this. This is not a representation of convergent evolution. It's bullshit. Convergent evolution would be more like, some bird Pokemon having similar shaped wings or something. It's a retarded concept. If they wanted to do this, they could have just made these regional variants and said, Diglett burrowed its way underwater or something, and this is Paldean Diglett. And Tentacool were forced onto land somehow and became mushrooms. So, they could have just made these regional variants if they absolutely wanted to use these designs. The Wiglet and Wugtrio designs are shit anyway, so they shouldn't have used them regardless. Poor Diglett, man. Diglett deserves better. Every time Diglett gets something even remotely related to him, it looks retarded. We got these retarded regional fakes for him. He got a shitty Alolan form that looked like crap. Diglett does not deserve this. Diglett is getting too much shit that's, tangentially related to him. So I hate this whole concept. I hope this doesn't become a thing that they do any more of. They love abandoning concepts anyway, so hopefully this is one of the ones that they forget they ever did and just move on with, because it's just a bad idea to begin with. So anyway, moving on, we also had a subset of legendaries that aren't related to the mascots. Usually a trio. This time it's a quartet called the Treasures of Ruin. And all four of these Pokemon have Chinese sounding names, and these designs are all absolutely great. I love all four of these. Again, these are up there with Annihilate as some of the best designs from this entire gen. Chien, Pao, and Chi Yu are my favorite too, probably, but I like all four of them a lot. These are all fantastic, some of the best legendary designs we've gotten in a very long time. So I'm really satisfied with all those. And then we have the other big new subset of Pokemon that were introduced this gen, which are very similar in concept to Ultra Beasts, but they're not Ultra Beasts. Instead, we got Paradox Pokemon. Now, Paradox Pokemon tie in with the story, and like I said, they're similar to Ultra Beasts, except that Ultra Beasts were supposed to be like Pokemon from different dimensions. These are more Pokemon from different timelines, I think. I think it's supposed to be alternate timelines. I don't really know. They didn't make that totally clear. Maybe it is actually our past and future, but it would make more sense for it to be alternate past and future. So that's what I'm going with. But anyway, all these Pokemon, again, look similar to Pokemon that we know of, but they are obviously different. And some of them look like ancient ancestors to the Pokemon we know, and then some of them are supposed to be like the Pokemon we know in the future. Now, the ancient designs are in Scarlet, and the future designs are in Violet. And the ancient designs, in my opinion, are much better than most of the future designs. Mainly because the future designs all went with the same aesthetic and just made them all into like robots. When some of them do look pretty cool. Also, another thing, all these have really weird names. Like the one that looks like Jigglypuff is named Screamtail. And then all the future ones are like Iron something. All these names are made of just like two normal words. So we have like Screamtail and Great Tusk and Fluttermane and things like that for the ancient ones. And then all the future ones are just like Iron Blank. So you have Iron Hands and Iron Treads and so on. But yeah, some of the future ones are really cool looking. Iron Moth is definitely my favorite one. I think it just looks absolutely great. Iron Thorns, the one that looks like Tyranitar, it looks pretty good too. Obviously got the, Mechagodzilla vibe going on. But overall, I am a much bigger fan of the ancient ones. I like all the ancient designs pretty good. The one that looks like a Mega Salamence almost is named Roaring Moon. And that 100% should have been Mega Salamence's design, because Mega Salamence is one of the few Megas that I actually didn't like. And this thing just looks absolutely fantastic. So, I love Roaring Moon. It's fucking great. The futuristic counterpart to him, I guess, is the one that looks like sort of a fusion between Mega Gallade and Mega Gardevoir. And its name is Iron Valiant. And when I first saw the image of it, I thought it was okay looking. But then when I saw it in motion was actually when I ended up liking it a lot more. Because when you first see it in the game, the blade that it's holding is actually separated into two and is attached to its arms, kind of like Mega Gallade's, blade arms. And then, as you can see in the official art, those blades detach and combine together to become like a double-ended lance weapon for it. And that's a really neat concept, and that actually made me like the design a lot more. So overall, I think the concept of Paradox Pokemon is really cool, and I think most of the designs are on point as well. And all I could think about when I was going through these and saying, like, man, these are really cool. All I could think about is this whole concept will be totally abandoned after these games and never touched on again. So enjoy them while they're here, because you're never going to get any more. They might add some more. I mean, they already did. Spoiler alert, they already did add some more in the DLC, and there might be more beyond that. But, once they get through with Gen 9, we're never getting any more of these. It's going to be just like the Ultra Beasts. We'll never see any more of these again. So enjoy them while they're here, because they'll never be expanded upon. So then moving on to the version mascots, which again are also related to the Paradox Pokemon. We got Koraidon and Miraidon, which both of them are supposed to be kind of like Paradox forms for a Pokemon named Cyclozar, which is just one of the regular Pokemon from this gen, but the legends are supposed to be like past and future versions of him. And they all got this thing going on where they can become a bike. They serve as sort of your replacement for your HM slave or whatever. So you can ride it around to travel faster, and then you can ride it into the water, and it will travel on water, and you can climb up cliffs and fly, and do shit kind of similar to the ride Pokemon that you had in Legends Arceus, except all rolled into one. So these things all have several different forms for the different like modes of transportation. They have like a form with wings for the gliding form, and then they have one with their tails rolled up and their necks turned into wheels. Which overall, I like the design of these two a lot. Again, Koraidon, the ancient one, looks better than Miraidon, the future one, but they both look pretty cool. I will say that Miraidon wins out as far as like his bike forms, because since he's more robotic looking, he actually functions like you would expect a bike to function. Like he actually has wheels and like booster jets for back legs and stuff, so he functions more as a bike better. Koraidon looks pretty goofy with his giant neck sack inflated and his tail rolled up into a wheel, and neither of those actually function as wheels. He just has them out and runs on all fours, which looks goofy because he could run much more efficiently without his neck inflated. They could have just saved that for the water traversal form, but they didn't because they wanted to go with the bike aesthetic. So as far as like the rideable modes of all of these, Miraidon definitely wins. But as far as their actual battle modes, I think Koraidon does look better. But overall, I do like both the legendary designs. So then moving on to just random Pokemon that I either really liked or really hated or wanted to make a comment about. I'm just going to jump around here to different lines and such. We got the Fido line, which I ended up liking a lot more than I expected to, mostly because of the evolution Darkspawn. Having a dog made of bread is like pre-baked bread, and then after it's baked bread, is a pretty neat idea, and Darkspawn's design is fantastic. So I actually ended up really liking it a lot. Another line that I liked a lot was the Wattrel line. That's a regional bird this time. And then also Veluza, which is just a random Fishmon. But the Fishmon and Birdmons usually always end up being some of my favorite ones, especially Birdmons. But for whatever reason, the birds and the fish always end up looking pretty good to me most of the time. And it's no different here. We got some good Birdmons and good Fishmons. We got a Pokemon based on an II named Grafai, and he's like a graffiti artist. And I like him a lot. Now, he has a pre-evolution named Shroodle. Shroodle looks like crap and has absolutely no reason to exist. Grafai should have been a single stage line. So I like one of those, but not the pre-evo. And also this gen, we wound up getting a lot of Pokemon that people have been asking for a long time. We finally got our Flamingo Pokemon, who's named Flamigo. And it's literally just my mom's Flamingo. It's just a regular pink Flamingo, but its neck is tied in a knot. So it's really basic, but, with the meme baits and weird bullshit designs they've been doing a lot of recently, I'm actually glad that they didn't do something ridiculous with this. and I actually do like the design, even though it's really basic. Also, we finally got our grass and fire chili pepper Pokemon that people have been begging for forever, and it looks like shit. It's 2 stages, both of them suck. I don't like anything about that. And then, most of all, we finally got probably the most requested Pokemon in the history of Pokemon. We finally got a Dolphin Pokemon. And it is 2 stages. It is also meme bait, by the way. I don't hate the design or anything, but it is definitely 100% meme bait. So, the first stage is named Finizen, and then it evolves into Palafin, and Palafin has 2 forms. The first of which is Zero form, which looks exactly like Finizen, except it has a heart design on its chest. And then it can form change into Hero form, so 0 to Hero. And the Hero form kind of looks like a superhero, which is a little on the goofy side. It's another one that's kind of growed on me the more I've seen it, but it is kind of goofy. So the whole concept is it's supposed to be like it starts out as a normal citizen, and then it evolves and disguises itself as a normal citizen, but it's actually a superhero. So it's a neat concept, I guess. I just think it's funny that people have been begging for a dolphin design for so long, and we finally get one, and it's meme bait like everything else we get now. But like I said, I don't hate the design. Actually, the Finizen design is fantastic. The gimmicky evolution I go back and forth on, but I don't hate it. So, a few other lines I just wanted to mention here. We had the Smoliv line. I actually like it a lot. We also have the pseudo-legendary this time, which their names are Frigibax, Arctibax, and Baxcalibur. So they're like a Spinosaurus axe-themed line. And I'm not in love with them, but I do like them more than the pseudo-legendary we got in Gen 8. I hated the Dragapult line. I didn't like any of their designs. These are better. Actually, I think the middle stage is probably the best one out of the 3. Same with the Dolive line, come to think of it. Both those, the middle stages are probably the best ones. But yeah, it's an improvement from last gen, so at least it's got that going for it. We also have the Charcadet line, which I like a lot, especially Ceruledge. I know both his evolutions look like Mega Man enemies, but they do look cool. Ceruledge is awesome. And then we have this thing here in the bottom left. This thing is named Gimmighoul, and it's got 2 forms. One of which is chest form, and one of which is, I think it's called roaming form. And the design is fine. I'm kind of neutral on the design. I don't really have any major issues with it or anything. But my issue with the Pokemon overall is that the chest form is in the game like normal. You just catch it. The roaming form is exclusive to fucking Pokemon Go. And if you've watched anything on my channel before, you know that I hate Pokemon Go with every fiber of my being, and anything even tangentially related to it is automatically on my shit list. So I hate that they limited one of these forms to their shit mobile game bullshit. When they announced the DLC, they talked about the other forms of Vivillon, because Vivillon's in this game, but you can only get Fancy Pattern. All the other Vivillon patterns are going to be tied into Go, too. You got to send some kind of postcard or some bullshit. You got to do Go shit to get the other Vivillon patterns, too, so that sucks, too. Fuck Go, fuck anything even related to Go. But, anyway, mobile ranting aside, this thing does evolve into this little gold guy here. And his name is Golden Go. And this thing is actually Pokemon number 1000 in the Dex. Its national Dex number is 1000. And people are expecting something big and important for, the 1000 slot. Instead, we just get another goofy meme bait design that looks like shit. He's supposed to be some kind of reggae surfer dude or something who's made out of like stacked up coins. I don't know. I hate this design, and it sucks that, number 1000 is, goofy meme bait again. But yeah, there was a few duds in this crop, but overall I'm more happy with these than I was with Gen 8. So, I consider that overall an improvement. Now, putting all the Dex stuff aside and moving on to the actual meat of the game, the region itself, of course, this time is the Paldea region. And unfortunately, they fell for the open world meme bullshit. So, we got open world. Maybe people can shut their fucking traps about it now. Of course they won't. I've talked about this a little bit in some of my past videos, I think. Pokemon does not belong in an open world setting. It doesn't need to be there. A well-designed, well-laid out map with proper routes would 100% be a better experience for these kind of games. I know a lot of people are going to disagree with that, but I don't give a fuck. They're all wrong. Open world does not belong, and this game is actually a very good example of this, because overall this map is very boring and unmemorable. As you explore the game, like, most of the world just kind of blends together. You got different areas, you know, you got your desert and your snow area and shit like that, but nothing really stands out, and everything just kind of ends up blurring together into this big sort of vague mess. Now, there are a few caves. I'll give them a little bit of credit. I was wanting some, sort of dungeons and caves and things to explore, because we didn't get pretty much any of that in base Sword and Shield. They added a little in the DLC. But there are some caves and things to explore here on this map. Now, most of the caves just end up sort of feeling like the outside overworld, just with a roof over it. So, again, it wasn't anything that was real gripping to me. But, yeah, I'm absolutely not a fan of the overworld concept for Pokemon at all. I'm generally not a fan of this map and this world. This whole region just doesn't... It just doesn't feel good to me. It just feels boring. Now, another thing that ties in with the whole open world concept a little bit is the fact that they wanted to make this big open world also entirely accessible for multiplayer. And to do so, we had to make some compromises. And one of these compromises was nearly all of the fucking indoors. Because most of the buildings in this entire game are actually not enterable at all. The few cities that are spread across the map, those cities, again, are very boring and unmemorable, because you can't go in most of the buildings in any of them. You just kind of wander around. Most of the buildings are just there for decoration. The few that are supposed to be like shops and stuff, when you walk up to the door and try to enter it, it just pops up with a menu of what you can buy from the store. So if you're buying your, clothes or items or whatever, it's basically just reduced to a menu. And then when you close out the menu, you just, you're back in the open world. There's only a handful of buildings in the entire game that you actually can enter. The gyms, you can go inside those. Now, the gyms are pretty much just the lobbies. And then the actual gym challenges and the gym battles, again, take place elsewhere in the town. Usually in an outdoor arena. The main building that you can actually enter and do things in mostly is the school, which you start out in. The Naranja and what's it called? Uva Academy, whatever. The school you're in at the beginning. It's more fleshed out and has a bunch of different rooms you can go to. Now you travel from room to room again with a menu. There's not actually like hallways and stuff where you can manually go from place to place like you would, exploring a normal building. So it's still sort of fractured feeling, but at least they have some indoor spaces that you can explore, but they're all mostly isolated to that one area. And a few other random places. Even the Pokemon centers, like, we don't have an actual Pokemon center anymore. The Pokemon centers have been turned into these outdoor kiosk things. Again, all of this is done, I believe, just to make it compatible with the multiplayer, because next to the little kiosk, they do have these little union circles where you can meet other players and trade and battle and do the picnics, which the picnics are like your replacement for your, Ami, Refresh, camp features from before. And I'm guessing they just couldn't get it where the game could load with some people, running around out and about in the overworld and then other people inside a building. So they just got rid of all the buildings, uh, which is kind of a hilarious way to solve that problem when you think about it. So we got a very shallow multiplayer experience in what I believe to be a pretty high cost, making all of your cities basically just backdrops and making your world feel a lot more hollow and unexplorable. Is not a good trade off for a shitty multiplayer gimmick. Of course, I'm not a fan of multiplayer in general, but that's just me. Now, moving on to the graphics, they're not very good, but I'm like usual. I'm not gonna bitch about the graphics very much. I am going to bitch about the visuals for this game though, because these games are absolutely painful to look at. And it's not really so much a graphical issue. I think it's more of a art direction issue, I guess. First of all of the human characters in this game are just absolutely hideous. These are some of the worst character designs I've ever seen, not only just in a Pokemon game, in any kind of game, period. These people look absolutely awful. I have no idea what they were thinking with some of these human designs. They improved on the Pokemon designs, at least in general, but the humans are the exact opposite situation. Everyone from just like random NPCs to the characters in the story to the gym leaders and Elite Four members, like all of them just look absolutely out of place. If you showed me any of these people and they didn't have any like Pokeballs or anything on their person, I would never identify any of these people as characters in a Pokemon game. They just absolutely do not have that look to them at all. A lot of them go way out into Goofy Land. I mean, if you just look at the gym leaders, we got a Twitch Thoughts and a rapping Granny. Like, what is even going on? Over on the Elite Four side, we got, the lolliest lolly who ever lollied. And then we have a Harry Potter extra reject. There is just androgyny absolutely everywhere. Which, that's all I'm going to say about that before I get myself in trouble with YouTube. But the designs look absolutely awful. This even extends to the player characters themselves. I talked before about how those god-awful school uniforms look. We do have trainer customization in this game, but guess what? All the trainer customization options are just variants of the shitty school uniforms. So no matter what you do, you're going to end up, looking like your mommy dressed you up in your shitty school uniform. They got different variants and accessories and shit, but none of them can save this. And they are adding more trainer customization options in the DLC, which again I'll talk about later, but it sounds like that might not be saving it either. It might be more of the same. And speaking of the outfits and stuff, a lot of these outfits have like really detailed textures, and the really detailed textures of the clothes in contrast with like the low detailed textures of the world and the just environment and stuff, that was really off-putting to me. I don't know if that bothered anyone else, but that's one of the things that stood out to me when I was looking at this. Like, it felt out of place. So, visually, I absolutely think that Gen 8 wins out over these games, even with all of Gen 8's problems. And, my Nintendo 64 tree. Even with that, like, Gen 8 didn't make my eyes want to bleed. So, at least it had that going for it. These games absolutely do not. Some of it was like really weird too. Like this school, I want someone to explain this school to me, because a lot of the like random trainers that you find, just battle out in the world, they're also supposed to be students at the school you go to. And these students, like some of them are literal toddlers, and then some of them look like overweight, like 35-year-old fat balding dudes. Like, what the fuck kind of school is this? Like, what is the age range for these students? You have literal toddlers and then like middle aged dudes going to the same school. Like that makes absolutely no sense. But anyway, moving on from their strange NPC designs, let's go ahead and talk about the new gimmick this time, because of course we had to have a gimmick every fucking generation that we'll never see again after this gen, which I'm actually kind of glad of. Because this time, the new gimmick is called terastallizing. And what this is it basically turns your Pokemon into sort of like a crystallized version of themselves and gives them a ridiculously oversized, goofy ass crown on their head that in some cases is larger than their entire body. And like gameplay wise, what this does is it actually changes your Pokemon's type into a Terra type. So any Pokemon that you can get in the game can be changed to any type, basically. And which crown they get is different based on what type their Terra type is. So there's 18 different crowns to go with the 18 different types. And all of them are a different goofy thing. And every single one of them looks absolutely retarded. Now, as a concept, like, changing your Pokemon's type isn't the worst idea in the world. It gives you vibes of like the Delta Species cards from the TCG back in the day. So I don't hate the concept as far as like, from a gameplay perspective. But from an aesthetic perspective, this is absolutely, without a doubt, the complete worst looking gimmick we've ever gotten. Giving your Pokemon a giant, just absurdly sized, goofy crown on its head, it's just not cool. There's no way to make it cool. It looks absurd. Again, it's meme bait. And it just can't be taken seriously at all. I wasn't a huge fan of the Dynamaxing stuff from Gen 8 either. But even that, your Pokemon growing giant is a lot less lame than your Pokemon getting a severe neck injury because they have a giant stone crown twice the size of their body glued to their head. So, overall, I think I end up hating terastallizing the most out of any gimmick just because of the looks of it. Like, if it was just presented in a different way, it wouldn't be as bad. But every time, it happened in the game, I just couldn't take it seriously. It completely took you out of the moment of the battle because it's just so fucking goofy and out of place. The one thing I can give this gimmick credit for is that there aren't any new forms tied to it. Like, the Gigantamax forms were tied to the Dynamaxing, and then of course, Mega Evolutions, were new designs themselves. Even Z moves have one new design tied to it because Ultra Necrozma, who gets forgotten all the time and will probably never be in a game again until the inevitable Gen 7 remakes in many years from now. Terastallizing doesn't have anything like that, at least for now. It might get something like that in the DLC and, fuck all this up. But at least for now, there are no designs tied to it. So that's the silver lining of when it's inevitably removed for the Gen 10 games. You won't actually be losing out on any Pokemon designs that you'll never get to see again because it's just, a giant goofy crown glued to their heads. Another thing I will give them a little bit of credit for is they, of course, replaced the Max Raid battles with Terra Raid battles now, where you can battle wild Terra Pokemon and catch them, and it works similar to the raid battles before, where it's 4 trainers going against the one Pokemon. Except they overhauled how the battle works, and now you don't have to wait for everyone to take a turn. You can basically attack the Terra Pokemon all independently. And the overall battle just has a timer now. So you have to deplete the Terra Pokemon's HP before the timer runs out. And I actually like this system a lot better than the Max Raid battle system. I'm still not a fan of raid battles in general, but if you're bound and determined to have the fucking raid battles in the game, I prefer this method of them to the Gen 8 method. So I'm still not a fan overall, but I do feel like it's an improvement to what we had before. So next we'll talk about the stories. There are 3 story paths in this game, which sounds like it's going to be a lot of content, but it's really just all the content from a normal game divided up into 3 sections. So you have Victory Road first, which we don't have an actual Victory Road as what you would think of as a Victory Road, like a late in game dungeon. We actually don't have that in this game at all. Instead, Victory Road is just what they're calling the path where you battle the 8 gyms and then go to the Pokemon League. Now, one thing to note here is that champion this time in this game is actually a rank now instead of a title. So you don't have one champion, you have a bunch of trainers who have achieved the rank of champion, which honestly kind of waters the whole thing down. They treated Geeta as, the top champion, so I guess she's supposed to, represent the best of all the ones with the champion rank, and she is the one that you have to beat to become champion rank yourself. But still, making it a rank and having there be multiple champions just makes it feel less special than, you becoming the sole champion like in previous games. So the next path is called Starfall Street, and this is the path with the normal villainous team route, which I use that term very, very, very loosely, because the villainous team this time is Team Star, and they're not a villainous team at all. They're not anything other than a giant fucking joke. Like, literally, this team, the backstory for this team is that it was a bunch of weirdos who were bullied in school because they were weirdos. And they felt bad about getting bullied, so they got together and decided to combat their bullies by putting on absolutely retarded looking outfits and then going back and threatening them, I guess, with weird cars. I'm not making this up. This is the actual fucking plot of this game. Which I talked earlier about how god-awful the characters in this game looks. No one exemplifies that more than Team fucking Star. How anyone could possibly take any of these clowns seriously is beyond me. Are they even meant to be a threat? I don't know, but they're not threatening at all. They all look completely ridiculous. I want to say meme bait again, but I don't even know if this is meme bait. This just looks like god-awful character design. Like, what were they thinking when they approved this? I can't even begin to imagine what was going through their heads. I thought Team Yell was bad in fucking Sword and Shield. Hell, I'd take Team Yell back in an instant. A team of simps is still better than whatever the fuck this was. Trying to take, the weirdo kids who always got bullied at school and turning them into some kind of team that we're supposed to take seriously in any capacity is just a recipe for disaster. So the Starfall Street route was the route that I absolutely hated the most about this game. It's probably the thing, outside of the decks, it's probably the thing I do hate the most about this game. The entire story sucked. The characters sucked. I genuinely struggled to get through that part of the playthrough. Like, I absolutely could not stand this shit. It was just awful in every way. And the thing that made me hate this even more was the fact that they added another new feature that they called Let's Go, and it's basically just auto battling. And I hate auto battling features in any kind of game anyway, because, if you got a good battle system, then why would I want to automate it and not actually play the fucking thing? And if it's a bad battle system and I'd rather automate it and not play it, then it's a bad fucking game. So, I don't like auto battling in general. They had that here in this game. You can use it anywhere in the overworld and just kind of send your Pokemon out and they just kind of run off and attack whatever around. But you are actually required to use it for this because the different Team Star bases, you have to go into the bases and use the Let's Go auto battle thing to beat a bunch of Pokemon in the bases, and then that brings out the Team Star member and then you battle them. So forcing to use the shitty feature that I don't like either made the entire thing even worse. But anyway, moving on. The third story path is called the Path of Legends, and this one was focused on another character named Arven, who I guess is supposed to be one of your friends. And he's got a Pokemon named Mabastiff, who is hurt, and you're trying to go around and collect these plants to heal Mabastiff's injuries. And to get all these plants, you have to fight the Titan Pokemon, which are just regular Pokemon that have grown giant because someone on this development team has a size fetish and have to put it in every single fucking Pokemon game we get now. Like, seriously, this is out of control. This is going all the way back to Gen 7. We had the Totem Pokemon in Gen 7. Then in Gen 8, we had the Dynamaxing and Gigantamaxing, where Pokemon grow giant. We had the size differences in Pokemon Legends Arceus, as well as the... What the fuck were those Pokemon called that you had the boss battles where you had to throw the bombs at them? I can't even remember what those fucking things were called, but they were big too. And now we have the Titan Pokemon in this game. Like, every single fucking game we get has to have giant Pokemon in it. Why? Why do you keep reusing this concept? Like, it's enough. Do something else. Fuck. But anyway, that was the story for him. You just go around and you fight the Titan Pokemon, and you beat them, and you heal up Mabastiff, and yeah. So, anyway, this story path kind of ties in more with the fourth one, which there is a fourth path, which is unlocked after you beat the 3 main ones. So the last path is called The Way Home, and this is like the final plot of the game, like the climax, where you team up with the characters from the first 2 paths, well, all 3 paths. You get with Arven, and then you get with Nimona, who is the battle-obsessed, annoying autist from the Victory Road path, and then you get with Penny, who was the secret leader of Team Star, who looks like, you know, Tumblr Harry Potter. And all of you go into the big giant crater in the middle of the region. And you go down there and you learn about the Paradox Pokemon. And you learn about the backstory for the legend. And the professor who's supposed to be Arven's parent. And it's this whole convoluted plot with time machines and AI robots. And I'm not going to get into all of it here. I wasn't crazy about this plot. I guess it's more coherent than the plot in Gen 8 with the bullshit with Rose and Eternatus just kind of, you know, being pulled out of his asshole at the last minute. So, overall, I guess it's structured better than Gen 8's plot, and it is an improvement, but it still wasn't anything I was really all that enthralled by. With a few exceptions, you know, the plots in Pokemon are generally not all that great anyway. Gen 5 and Gen 7 had pretty good stories, but those are generally the exception and not the rule. So, you know, I wasn't expecting some, you know, monumental Shakespeare writing here. But overall, I'm just kind of neutral on this whole Way Home plot. It didn't really do anything for me. So, anyway, as far as the post-game goes, there is very little, as always, because you have to pay for that in the DLC that they announced the other day. So, the only real post-game thing that you can do is you can go around and you can rematch all the gyms, but you only can do that once. You rematch all the gyms once, and then you go back to the school and you have an Academy Ace tournament, which this serves as like a repeatable way to face the champion, because once you beat the Pokemon League in the Victory Road story, you actually can't re-challenge the Elite Four like you normally can. You can re-challenge this Academy Ace tournament, and the participants in it, you know, changes every time you do it. And it includes some of the teachers from the Academy, and it includes Gita, and, you know, some of the other important characters in the story and stuff. So this serves as your replacement for your Pokemon League rematches, I guess. I believe your Pokemon do get the champion ribbon from winning this. So that's your replacement for that. But that's really the only post-game thing they got going on. There is no battle facility whatsoever. Now, again, it seems like this might get addressed in the DLC. But as far as the base game goes, there's no kind of battle tower or any kind of equivalent. There's no huge like post-game story plot or anything outside of this one little tournament. So you're gonna be relying heavily on that DLC for post-game. So be ready to open up your wallet again if you want any kind of continuation of this game whatsoever. So a few other just random things I wanted to mention here. TMs are craftable this time. They're single use again, but you can craft as many of them as you want. And you craft them from items that that are dropped by Pokemon that you beat. Which I actually like this idea. It's sort of adopting a simplified, dumbed down version of the crafting system from Legends Arceus, which I thought was one of the very few good points of that game. So I actually kind of like that. Speaking of things they pulled from Legends Arceus, hail as a weather condition has been replaced by snow. Now, snow works a little bit different than it did in Legends Arceus because, game mechanic differences. But yeah, it looks like hail is out, I assume, permanently, and it's just being replaced by snow now. The moveset system is, again, more similar to Legends Arceus, where you can have your Pokemon relearn moves that they've forgotten without having to go to the move reminder. You can just do it from the menu, I believe, or from the boxes or whatever. So that's not exactly the same as it was in Legends Arceus, but it's closer to it to where you can, change up your moveset with a lot less trouble. So again, I think that's an improvement. There is no Legends Arceus style on-demand evolution though, which that's actually one of the things I really liked about Legends Arceus is you could choose when your Pokemon evolved and do it manually by pressing a button from the menu. This is back to more traditional Pokemon game style where, when the evolution condition is met, they just automatically evolve. And if you don't want them to, you gotta press the B button. So that's actually something that I wish they adopted from Legends Arceus, and they didn't. And then, of course, as of tradition, we have a bunch of shit they removed, because we have to remove things all the fucking time. There is no fishing in this game at all, in any fashion. There is no Pokerus. They got rid of that concept entirely as well. Breeding has not been removed, but it has been completely overhauled because breeding has been rolled into the whole picnic mechanic. So they removed the daycare, nursery, whatever you want to call it. They removed that, and now in order to breed your Pokemon, literally all you have to do is have a picnic and have 2 compatible Pokemon anywhere in your party. And eggs just pop up in your fucking picnic basket. Imagine going to a picnic and your Pokemon are in the background just fucking, and then they come over and shit out an egg on your ham sandwich. That's basically what happens in this game. So that's how you get eggs now. If you're doing the multiplayer thing and picnicking with another actual person, your Pokemon can make an egg with some of their Pokemon, again, if you have compatible ones. If you have more than 2 compatible Pokemon in your party, I think it's just random as far as like which ones end up breeding with each other. So if you want to breed something specific, I guess you had to empty out your entire party except for the 2 that you actually want to breed with. So yeah, breeding got a complete overhaul. As part of that, they did also remove incense from the game. There are no incense anymore. All the baby Pokemon that you would normally need an incense to get, you just get those naturally now. So then the last thing here I do want to mention about the base games was the absolutely absurd amount of glitches and bugs that the game did launch with. Now, it has been patched multiple times, I believe, since launch. Some of them have been fixed. Some of them have not. A lot of these glitches were really funny, too. If you look up some of the videos and stuff from it, a lot of them were pretty comical with, character models getting absurdly distorted and people falling through the map and, like, random NPCs just walking through the middle of a battle and stuff like that. Like, some of those are pretty funny. But the main point that I even brought this up for was just that the fact that this thing launched in a condition that it absolutely should not have launched in. And even several months after launch. Like, I'm slow as fuck about getting these videos up. and I still almost beat their fucking patch out. And they still haven't got everything fixed, even with the patch. So, it's ridiculous that these games are being put out in this condition. It's obvious that this schedule is just absolutely crippling these games. They need to get off this yearly release bullshit. You'd think they would have learned that by now. Clearly they haven't. That's one of the big contributing reasons to Dexit being an issue in the first place. And it's snowballing more and more and becoming issues with just getting the game into a functional state. And I can only see this getting worse in the future. So a change in release schedule is very much needed, but I absolutely do not see it happening because they have absolutely no incentive to change anything when you can put your game out in this shape and, still sell 20 million plus units. You have no reason to change anything. So, yeah, that's pretty much my thoughts on the base game. I am going to go ahead and cover the DLC very quickly here as fast as I can. So they did announce an expansion pass DLC bullshit during the Pokemon Day Presents video. And this seems to be very similar to the one that they did for Sword and Shield. It is going to be coming in 2 parts, like Sword and Shields did. The first part is out this fall, and then the second one is out in winter. So part 1, well, overall the DLC is called The Hidden Treasure of Area Zero. And the first part of it is called the Teal Mask, with the second part being the Indigo Disc. Now, they already have the pre-orders up for this DLC, and they, like I said, they did just release a big patch for the game. And this patch also did add a little bit of extra content already, as sort of a teaser for the DLC that's coming later. And part of this new content that is already out now is actually 2 new Paradox Pokemon, which were teased in the base game. You saw sketches of 2 Paradoxmon in the books that you can find in the game. Now, in these sketches, they looked like fusions of the legendary beasts and the Swords of Justice. And in context, in the books, they were presented as not like a Pokemon that was actually cited anywhere. They were supposed to be like a sketch of something that the artist imagined might be a Paradox Pokemon. So these things were never actually claimed to exist, but they were kind of teased here, which doesn't make a whole lot of sense because the ones we got actually don't look like these at all. So instead what we got were 2 new Paradox Pokemon named Walking Wake and Iron Leaves. And Walking Wake is just an ancient version of Suicune, and then Iron Leaves is the futuristic version of Virizion. And they don't have any elements of the other legendary beasts or the other Swords of Justice at all. So they end up not being fusions, they just end up being standard Paradox forms for Suicune and Virizion, respectively. Which the designs look good. I mean, I don't hate either one of these designs. They turned Suicune into a dinosaur for some reason, which doesn't make any sense. But he looks nice, at least. And then, of course, Iron Leaves is just, Mecha Virizion, like all the other futuristic mecha forms. But they don't look bad, but it just seems confusing to me that they would tease fusions and then give us something that's not even that. Like, why bother even doing that? Now, of course, we don't know much about the DLCs. Maybe we're going to get, fusion forms of them later. Maybe we're going to get Paradox forms of the other beasts and swords. Maybe there'll be some way to fuse them together. Who the fuck knows? But at least for right now, it just seems like an odd choice to me. Now, I touched on this briefly earlier when I was talking about trainer customization, but the other little bit of new content that is out now, if you go ahead and pre-order the DLC, you do get some new outfits immediately added to the game. The issue is that these new outfits are just more school fucking uniforms that still look goofy and ridiculous. So, no matter what you do, you're still stuck in the fucking school uniforms. You're just changing from one uniform to another. So the DLC's adding new trainer customization stuff, but it still might be pretty limited as far as your options go. So anyway, as far as what details we do have about the two actual DLC parts that are coming later, the first one, which is the teal mask, they showed a bit about it, and they said that it's going to be like basically you're going on a school trip to a new area, which is named Kitakami, which is a very Japanese looking location. I don't know if it's just like one town or an island or a whole region or what exactly this is. But you're going to Kitakami, which is very Japanese looking. And it actually did show the player characters wearing some, Japanese looking clothes and not a school uniform. So we might get one thing that's not a school uniform, but it might literally just be this. We don't really know. But you go on this school trip to this new area, and it looks like some kind of summertime festival going on. So it seems like sort of a summer field trip kind of story to this. Now, they also did show a few new legendary Pokemon that are going to be in this. The first one is named Ogre which he's supposed to be like the main one, I guess. And it's this little weird looking guy who's wearing this weird mask thing. Design wise, it looks okay, I guess. I don't know if we're going to get a better look of it with the mask off. But based on what we've seen right now, I'm kind of neutral on it. It looks okay, I guess. And then beyond that, we also got a new legendary trio, which are named Okidogi, Monkey Dory, and Pheasantipity, which are really weird names. They seem to be based on a dog, monkey, and pheasant. So they seem to be based off the characters from the story of Momotaro, which is a funny coincidence if you're a Sentai fan, considering, Dome Brothers just wrapped up. But overall, I'm not huge on any of these designs. The pheasant is probably the best one out of the three. The dog is... I'm kind of neutral on the dog, and the monkey looks like shit. So, this legendary trio is definitely way, way, way worse than the quartet we got in the base game. But yeah, that's pretty much all they showed as far as details for the first part goes. Now, the second part, which is the Indigo Disc, which is coming in winter, they showed it, and in this one we're going to be going to like a different sister school, I guess, named Blueberry Academy, which is actually, I think, supposed to be like an underwater school, partially underwater building or something. So anyway, you go basically to do like a foreign exchange kind of deal, and you go to this other school, and apparently this school is focused on battling. So this entire thing may function as like your battle facility, which we didn't get in the base game. Pay money for it. So I'm expecting this part of the DLC to sort of fill that role, to be your post-game battle facility sort of area. I'm sure there'll be some kind of story element to it. They did show some new characters who also look shitty. But, there might be some kind of story, but this one seems to be focused more on battling. One of the first one, the part one, seems to be more of the story-focused part. But again, for this section, we also are getting some new Pokemon. They only showed one, I believe, for this one, which its name is Terapagos, which is this weird-looking turtle thing. I believe this one is supposed to be the third legendary to go along with Koraidon and Miraidon, because, again, the base game didn't have a third legendary to go with it like we normally get. So I believe this thing is supposed to fill that role. Once again, we got a sketch in one of the books in the base game that sort of teased this one out. And again, the sketch sort of looked not as different as the other ones, but the sketch looks kind of different than this one, but I still think it's supposed to be that same Pokemon. Maybe Terapagos ends up getting some alternate form or something that looks closer to this, or maybe it gets the, form change when it terrestrializes, and, we'll have a form tied to that they'll never get to see again. But yeah, as far as Terapagos goes, its design, it's okay, I guess. The type symbols being on its shell, I'm not really crazy about that. But overall, I guess it looks okay. And then, of course, just like with the Sword and Shield DLC, these updates are going to be adding several of the old Pokemon back into the game, so we are going to end up getting more than the 476 that the game has in it now. The official site is claiming that they're going to add in over 230 old Pokemon. So they don't give an exact number. It sounds like we're going to end up being somewhere in the neighborhood of around 700 Pokemon in this game by the time we get through with everything. So there's probably going to be still like 250 to 300 Pokemon missing because we can't have the fucking national decks no matter what. So just like with Sword and Shield, we're getting some back, but not all. So that's pretty much all the details we have on the DLC. One thing I do want to mention here that I did check on the eShop to make sure this was accurate. The expansion pass for Sword and Shield were $30, a piece for each game. And again, these you have to buy separately for each game. But they're $35 now. So the price is jacked up even more. So now you can pay $95 for a game that still has less content than a $40 game from a decade ago. So that's wonderful. Just keep jacking it up. They're about to make Pokemon Bank free because they're cutting off the eShop servers. So, they got to make up their fucking $5 from somewhere. So anyway, my overall impressions on these games, so far this Gen 9 just feels like Gen 8 Part 2. It's really inherited all of its problems from Gen 8, the Dexit issues, the visual issues, glitches. A lot of the problems that these games have started last gen and have carried over into these ones. There are a few new problems introduced. Again, there are some improvement in a few areas. The new crop of Pokemon, like I said, I do like these more than the Gen 8 mons in general. Of course, designs are always subjective, but, in my opinion, I think these are a little bit better as a whole. And of course, there are a few, quality of life things here and there that might be improvements. But overall, I was definitely not impressed by these. I can't make up my mind. I actually might like these less than Sword and Shield, which I hated Sword and Shield mostly because of the, rage from Dexit. But as far as the actual game itself goes, I might like Sword and Shield even less. Mostly because I hated all the characters. I hated all the visuals. It was, like I said, it was painful to look at the entire time I was going through this playthrough. So, the awful character designs, the unlikable characters themselves, and especially, the Team Star bullshit, just overall really soured my outlook on these games, even if you ignore all the Dexit horseshit. So, between, a bunch of Pokemon being missing and then the game itself just not being appealing, I just cannot get behind these games at all. I have no interest in purchasing them. I have no interest in the DLC. It's not really doing anything to curry any favor for me particularly. So, yeah, overall, like I said, this just feels like more of the same that we've been getting for the last few years. And as usual, I see no incentive for them to change anything for the better anytime soon. But anyway, I guess that's all I got to say, so lots of luck to you and yours.